Hi, everyone. Thanks for giving me approximately 25 minutes of your time to talk about some of the things that I'm working on. For those of you who don't know me in the space, I am the former CME digitization head, so Bitcoin futures out of CME Group, which is the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. That was our first major product that took us about 3 years of internal discussion to get out the door. I left CME back in July of 2017 after pretty much my entire career in banking and established companies to go work in blockchain for social good. And why? Why would someone who's basically an ex-banker and corporate person actually do that? I think for the first time I see a technology that has the potential to actually impact individuals in a way that the internet just didn't do. Not in the way that I think is about financial empowerment, that is actually about helping those who are most vulnerable to have, and in my case, I'm really focusing on financial access. So I want to talk to you a little bit about is a company called UnCorp, and it stands for Unleashing Wealth in Nations. And the concept came from my business partner and co-founder, Julius Akinyemi, who's the MIT Entrepreneur in Residence right now. And he's Nigerian by descent, but he's also French, and he's American, so he's a global citizen. And he saw a world where people are actually transacting every day. They are at the village level, at the market level, they have assets. They have things actually that they're trading every single day that has value. But here's the thing. In the developed world, or in our world, where we live today in France or in US or in UK, we don't recognize that. Why? Because it's not formally documented and it's not in a formal market system. But here's the thing. It exists and it has value. So what happens when you actually start documenting these things and you actually start recognizing people having assets and value? This is not a new concept. For those of you who are actively looking in this space, Hernando de Soto wrote a book called Mystery of Capital, which you should look at. It's written back in the 1990s, and it's still relevant today, about the fact that there's $9 trillion that they estimate of value, whether it's in land or assets, sitting in developing nations that's just not documented. And as far as the developed world is concerned, doesn't matter and doesn't count. To me, that doesn't sound right. And so one of the things that we're going to do, and I'm going to talk about today, is some of the things that we're doing to help rectify that. We are certainly not going to solve all the world's problems, but we're picking a piece of it, and we're going after that, and I'm going to give you some tangible examples of how we're doing that. So here's the thing I want to talk about right before I get into UN. We've got a perception problem, and this is why I'm going to mention this here today. I spend most of my time talking to big enterprises and big banks and central banks and politicians about blockchain and what's going on in this space. And we have a little bit of an issue with respect to sort of marketing and hype. They still think a lot of this, and this is a problem, because this is not taken seriously. And there's misunderstanding still in the space, which is why, for those of you who are going to get into blockchain for social good, I really implore you that education, at even the most basic level, of everyone and anyone you can speak to who's actually interested, educate them. Spend the time on education. Even now, after 9 years of Bitcoin and several years of Ethereum, we still need that. And I have a little problem with, and I have deep respect for Mark Carney, the head of the Central Bank of England, but I have a problem with that sort of highlighted bullet point there, which is that being part of financial systems or some financial markets is actually a privilege. I actually don't believe that. And I think he meant that in the context of you got to be responsible if you're participating. But actually, I see it as a right. You need to have the right to be able to participate in financial markets in order for you to actually be able to help any kind of wealth and recognition that you own assets. Because if you don't have that recognition in the markets or in the financial system, what are you left with? Very little, actually, in terms of options. And this is a true problem in many developed nations. So where are we today? I'm hoping actually in 2018, and I'm spending a lot of time on the road these days talking about this topic because I think it's critical. We need to start changing the dialogue. As much as I love the ICO models and all the stuff that's going on in crypto, we really need to change the model around what are we using blockchain for, and how is it actually going to help people? And how is it actually going to potentially solve real-world problems? And I'm a very practical person, so I'm going to give you some practical things that are happening today, and hopefully that'll give you food for thought, because there's a lot of greenfield, and let's face it, we need a lot of people getting involved to make the sea change that we need. So this is really about how do we change dialogue this year. I'd like to hear more conversation around what blockchain is going to do for people and problems in society than I really want to hear about, you know, some of the other stuff. Don't get me wrong, I still like, you know, the crypto stuff. So here's the thing. I also believe, and you may disagree with me, and again, this is all just my opinions. I'm a capitalist. I actually believe you can actually make money and do social good, that the two are not mutually exclusive, and actually you do need to be for profit, and I will tell you why. In most cases, I think you need to be for profit because I've spent the last decade in and out of Africa and different parts of developing nations. I will tell you that the problem of dependence is a real cultural problem right now. It is not about empowering people to be self-sufficient. A lot of what's going on is actually people dependent on handouts. And let's face it, if somebody gives you something for free, it's nice, but if they give it to you for free, how much do you value it versus something where you actually had to work to get it? Think about it for a second. It's no different in any other culture. In many ways, the problems that we have today is because we don't have economic sustainability in most of these countries. And the handouts that are being given are not actually helping. So I'm going to now delve into sort of what we're doing with Unleashing Wealth in Nations. We did a project, and when I say we, my business partner did a project in Senegal and Lower Mali in 2015. And then we're doing a project in Cameroon 2018, as well as several projects in Mauritius. And these are our test pilots to actually scale out. I call it Uberizing our model without the bad culture, which means we want to go into pretty much every developing nation that has a rural-based agricultural base for an economy. But why agriculture? Why are we focusing on agriculture to begin with? Well, here's the thing. We all eat. We all need food. I know that sounds really obvious, but I think sometimes developed nations forget that it's not just coming out of the supermarkets, it's coming out of real farmers tilling the land still today. I have been to many plantations in Africa. I've sat with the farmers. It is hard graft. For anyone who wants a dose of reality, like of what real life is like, go and visit a farm for an entire day and work from 4 in the morning until, you know, late afternoon. It's hard graft. And I have deep respect for farmers who are out there in the world because they feed each one of us in their own way. Here's the thing. The farmers also get an unfair deal. If you look at a supply chain in any physical commodity, if there's $10 or 10 euros of value that the end user is paying, how much do you think the farmer is getting? Probably in most cases, $1 or less, or €1 or less. Do you think that's fair? I don't. So here's the thing. If you don't think that's fair, and I'm not here to change the supply chain, I'm focusing on a very specific part, which is the source of the problem, which is at the farmer level. Okay, that's where I'm going to focus. Any one of you who wants to solve supply chain problem, please come join us. I'd love that. I don't want to change that $10 or 10 euro value. I want to change what's happening inside of that supply chain to put another dollar or another euro into that pocket of the farmer. That's all I want to do, but sounds easy, but it's not. So Bill Gates made the right point here. Part of the problem is trust. At a very fundamental level, I've been shocked myself, and I probably shouldn't be after all these years, about how basic information does not happen at the source level. Meaning, information about which farmers are doing what, how much yield they have every year, what are the prices at which they're actually getting paid. This stuff is not documented in many, many areas in any sort of form, not even on paper. And it's shocking how little information governments, organizations often have. And of course, it's all siloed. So, how do we solve for that? Well, problem statement is pretty obvious, and I've named a bunch of things. They're not getting fair prices for the commodity they sell. They are not getting verification that they own things. Guess what? If you own a cow, it's got value. If you've got land in a house, it's got value. But most of these things, people wouldn't even begin to estimate what their value is because they just don't know. They have no points of reference. And again, this is about lack of transparency and lack of information. And guess what? Who thrives in a world where there's very little information? Intermediaries thrive, and brokers thrive in a world. And don't get me wrong, I think there's always room for middlemen or middle people who actually add value, but upon investigation, you will also find that a lot of them do not add value. So that's an area of improvement. Market data, hedging comes a lot later in life for the farmers, but long story short, there's a laundry list of things that they don't have access to. Let's start with basic information. Okay, so how are we going to do this? Well, I'll give you some practical examples of how we're going to do this. Mobile phones. 5.4 billion people are going to have mobile phones before they have running water or electricity. To me, that's very sad, but if you believe Cisco's statistics, it's probably true. If I go to most villages in Tanzania or in Cameroon, in many places, I find that the farmers have mobile phones and smartphones even, but they may not have running water and electricity. Especially not one that services that are reliable, certainly not. So, let me just give you a recap of something we've already done and we learned from. So in Senegal and Mali, there's actually a picture of my business partner there, Julius. He's the guy with the khaki hat and the little bag, wearing khakis and a white shirt, and those are the village leaders with him. We're taking a village model approach. So in a village, everybody knows each other. In a village, everyone knows kind of everyone's business, whether they like it or not. What if you take that village model and you digitize it? So let's record it on a blockchain. Okay. Verification. How do you prevent somebody from cheating? Because in my world, I come from trading, I always assume there's a cheater out there. I always assume that there's someone out there who wants to cheat the system, just a little bit, or a lot. Well, you got to get the cheaters out. So there needs to be a reputation index, and there needs to be an ability to actually ferret out the people who are cheating very quickly because it becomes a toxic situation if you let them in for too long, right? So in this network, it's a village model. People know who they are, and they also know if someone cheats, it will be publicly disclosed. And that means your entire village's reputation index goes down because you screwed it for everyone else. That sucks, and everyone's going to know that. So there's some mechanisms in place that we're going to be looking at that basically prevent or at least mitigate. We can never stop cheaters from cheating if they want to cheat, but what you can do is actually find them out quickly and kick them out. That's the key, because it hurts everyone. So livestock were recorded. So in this the 2015 pilot, just to give you an analogy of something that can happen without even, they weren't expecting this. So they recorded all this livestock. They recorded actually 500,000 farmers, nearly 500,000 farmers worth of identity and land and livestock. And guess what happened? And all they did was put it on a database, because in 2015, blockchain really, hadn't come to the fore, at least not in terms of a practical solution. So they got a call, and they did this through a cooperative, and they got a call and they said, oh, Julius, and Julius is my business partner, we got an order. Order for what? We got an order for 1,000 slaughtered lambs every month from Saudi Arabia. Well, how did that happen? They found out we had a registry. What? Oh yeah, they found out we had a registry, then they called the cooperative and said, hey, is this for real? Are all these animals registered with these farmers actually in place? They said, yes, they exist. Well, they got a standing order for 1,000 slaughtered lambs every month. They'd never received that kind of bulk order before in their lives. And the Saudis, the Saudi Arabian group that found them through chance in many ways, just because it was documented somewhere. It's a small example, but here's direct impact for you. That's direct impact, right? And to me, if you can do that across regions, it matters to everyone, all those individuals who are making that money. The next level, though, that I would have done if I were part of this program, is I would have added a trading platform or a trading mechanism whereby prices would be transparent. Because I have a feeling they probably just said, here's your price, and then they said, sure, we'll take it, because they wanted the money. We need to kind of up that sort of price transparency. So that was the example in Senegal. I'm going to give you an example in Mauritius that actually helps governments. And the reason why we also need to help governments is because often governments don't realize that they need to manage their natural resources, and it's something that's actually coming into fore more and more. Puerto Rico is actually a classic example. They have had plants out of their island, which are indigenous to their island, that have resulted in 2 blockbuster drugs, actually global blockbuster drugs, one in, I believe, birth control, and the other one for headache. I could be wrong about that, so don't quote me. But long story short, they have received 0 in terms of royalties. Imagine if islands in particular who have indigenous plants can actually manage their own natural resource intellectual property. Imagine if they got a stream of royalty, what they could do with that. Imagine if the researchers who are working on cancer research or medicinal research of some kind could actually get credit for the fact that they worked on this research. And if there is a blockbuster drug or a skincare product that somebody decides to buy for like 300 euros a jar in France and can actually benefit those who actually helped with that research to get to that place, why should it only go to the pharmaceutical industry or to the cosmetics industry? This is about fairness again. This is about helping governments manage their natural resource intellectual property. And so when you think about the power of that, guess what? I think smart contracts. I think blockchain. This is pretty obvious. And in Mauritius, we've actually been mandated to document a group of their indigenous plants which have already been identified, and it's being backed by the government to work with us to do this. Even better, we've got a legal framework, because here's the reality. So what? You've got these documented on a blockchain. The practical reality is if someone decides to take it, where are you going to dispute it? What are you going to do about it if someone actually takes your plant? Well, you need recourse. You need to be able to enforce. At a country level, you probably need to pass a law that says, I'm going to penalize you for X if you take our plants, and we can verify this with DNA. And if you genetically modify it, which also they do, we're going to also be able to identify that. And so you will have to pass laws at the country level to be able to make sure that that doesn't happen. Or if it does happen, you can enforce it. But here's something even better. The United Nations World Intellectual Property Organization is based in Geneva. With any luck, there will be a legal framework that will help have a global umbrella legal framework to actually enforce this. So imagine if a group of islands actually had an issue, they have some recourse that could be recognized in international courts. Again, this is new stuff, but you've got to think about things just beyond documenting. There's actually a bigger set of issues that need to occur, or sorry, things that need to happen in order for, when issues occur, for you to actually be able to resolve them. So that's one practical example hopefully you'll find interesting. We will be implementing this very soon in the next few months. We have a pipeline of countries and islands who are looking to document their plants. I've been actually really pleasantly surprised by the amount of inbound we've been getting, and it's not even a project we're advertising. So let me talk about, I'm going to give you some final thoughts. How many minutes do I have left? Okay. I'm going to give you some final thoughts, but I do want to actually just talk about Cameroon for 1 second, because I mentioned agriculture earlier. In Cameroon, population is about 23 million people. They think over 50% are agriculture-based. So let's just say 12 million farmers, or related to farming. Most of them are small shareholder farmers. They have documented 1.6 to 1.8 million farmers, they estimate. They have a database, which is good. But hold on, wait a minute, 1.6 million out of what they think is 12 million? Where are the rest of those people's identity? That was my first question when we were talking to the government. Well, guess what? They're not. And that's a real stark example. So what are we going to do about it? The government's working with us to hand over that set of data. We will clean it up. We'll work with the cooperatives. We'll start documenting the assets. And we will look to take that 1.6 million to 3 million to 5 million to hopefully as many as we can. It's difficult. It's a huge region. For any of you who understand or know about Cameroon, there's some political issues at the moment. There's a lot going on. They have a lot of constraints. But we got to start somewhere. At least we're not starting from zero. we are working with the cooperatives. As I mentioned before, we're applying a village model, and that is the Cameroon 2018 project that I mentioned. We will be starting to do that. We've also been mandated to launch a mobile physical commodities, they're calling it an exchange, but I call it a platform. It's basically a place for farmers to come and start trading that will allow for price transparency. That's going to be critical for people to start negotiating better pricing. And to me, that is the only way we're going to put dollars or euros into their pockets. So step by step, Vanessa mentioned a number of steps that are critical here. We're covering identity, we're covering asset registration, we're covering access to financial inclusion. I'm not planning on being a bank, but we're partnering with a lot of other institutions to be able to offer financial services. All this stuff is intertwined, and for anyone to think that they can just do one piece and they can just build an exchange, for example, it's not going to happen. And I come from the exchange space. I've looked at most of the African exchanges, and there's reasons why they don't do well. Most of them don't. So let me leave you with this final thought on a couple other industries that I have spent some time on. The ones in blue are the ones that I'm actually involved in various stages on different projects. The ones in black are just things that I think are really interesting from a social good standpoint. There are a number of problems. Vanessa mentioned a bunch in the environment space. I think real estate is going to be a huge one. Housing is one of the single most biggest issues in the world with respect to the cost of living. People have jobs and they can't afford an apartment or a place of their own. This is a problem, and yet social housing, government institutions seem to not be able to tackle this problem. I moved back to New York City from London. I am shocked by the level of homelessness in New York City, and they spend billions supposedly on this, or hundreds of millions at least, and yet they're still not able to tackle this problem. I think we need new ways of looking at this. Home affordability is an issue, and the real estate market needs a little bit of a shakeup. Entertainment media, I think that's going to come into the fray. I mentioned that we're helping independent artists raise capital. That's the spot that we've chosen in film and TV. I know there's a ton of stuff going on in music. I think it's really exciting. For any of you who are interested, Los Angeles is actually a real hot spot right now for a lot of this media entertainment. Gamification is coming into play, as well as VR, AR. So I think there's going to be some really interesting things coming out of LA in particular, as well as there's cool stuff happening in Berlin, Germany in general. Energy is one that also Vanessa mentioned earlier. I think actually this is the single most pervasive problem that we are going to look to tackle, but it's going to be an issue because there are incumbents, there's laws, there's regulation. It's very much, to me, very similar to financial services in the way that you're dealing with some behemoths, and it's going to be really, really hard to move the dial. But I love what I'm seeing with certain companies, you know, looking at different models of the way we consume energy and the types of energy we consume. So I don't think we have any more time, but I'll happy to have conversations after. And I really appreciate your 25 minutes. Should we take, oh, okay, I'll take a question.
Hi, so I think you're doing great work.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for giving me approximately 25 minutes of your time to talk about some of the things that I'm working on. For those of you who don't know me in the space, I am the former CME digitization head.